It's been 4 years, and I'm still thinking about Martha is Dead. This game was my most anticipated release of 2022, and it disappointed me in a way I was totally unprepared for. And yet, those glimpses of potential of what I wanted it to be are still there. I decided to revisit the game and redo the Platinum Trophy on the PS5 version. Here are my thoughts. Full spoiler warnings, as I will be discussing pretty much every aspect of the game. Before the game was out, I ended up watching a Let's Play of the demo by Hollow, whom I had never watched before. The demo was a compilation of the start of the game mixed with some of the puppet sequences from much later on in the final game. They did a really good job of showing the best sides of the game with what they showed in the demo, and it got me incredibly hyped, and I put the release date on my calendar right away. So what did the demo show us? Beautiful graphics that seemed really impressive for an indie game for one thing. Hollow even decided to highlight the photorealistic style in his video title. The game opens on a close-up of our protagonist, Julia, that seems to exist primarily to show us how detailed the character model is. Then we get right into the story with a big splash. Julia finds a body floating in the water as she's checking the camera she's set up to photograph wildlife. She runs to the pier and jumps into the lake to help the person, only to discover it is the very dead body of her identical twin sister, Martha. She drags her sister to shore, and while she's still in the midst of processing what's happened, her parents run up to her, and her mother, who always despised her, is now hugging her, concerned, speaking slowly so that Julia can read her lips. Because her mother thinks she's deaf. Because her mother thinks she's Martha, her favorite child, and the corpse lying cold on the ground is Julia, the lesser daughter. Julia is overcome with being given that mother's love she's always craved but never had, and makes the split-second decision to nod instead of speaking up and clearing up the misconception. And now she's faced with the harrowing realization that she will have to pretend to be her deaf sister for the rest of her life.
I would have to pretend to be Martha.
Oh?
Forever.
What? No way.
What an absolutely soul-crushingly dreadful thought. I was so struck by that idea, it gave me chills and filled me with anxiety and heartbreak. I was hooked and desperate to know how she's going to navigate this truly awful situation. This was going to be a story unlike anything else I'd seen in a game before, is what I thought. What also really hooked me were the haunting aesthetics and the soundscape. The moment Julia jumps into the water, we hear a strange sounding song that, coupled with the imagery and storytelling, really worked on me. I figured out a little later that I was hit subconsciously with a hint of familiarity I couldn't quite place, which also enhanced the experience. I had heard this song before. It's from a YouTube video I'd watched years ago called Between Music's Aquasonic, Breaking the Surface. This is an underwater performance piece that I had been fascinated by at some point in time, and then mostly forgot about until it was used to great effect here. The music being played underwater really adds to the surreal, dreamlike feeling of the scene, and it really made me emotional even though I was watching it through someone else's commentary for the first time. If we're starting with all of this, it feels like diving straight into the deep end. Where do we go from here? Well, before the game is even out, first we're going to have some controversy and drama about censorship that kind of becomes bigger than the game itself was ever going to be. This game is graphic. That much was already clear from the demo, which shows a dream sequence where Julia cuts off Martha's face in an interactive gameplay sequence. This type of interactive gruesome content was apparently too much for Sony, and the PlayStation versions of the game would have to be censored before they were allowed to be released. The PC and Xbox versions were allowed to stay as is, but the PS4 and PS5 versions would have to make several changes to comply with the PlayStation Store rules. The game's publisher, Wired Productions, issued a statement on Twitter that got plenty of attention, and many articles were written about censorship in games using this game as an example. There were also plenty of YouTube videos made about this, so I'm not going to go too much into detail on this particular issue here. What ultimately ended up being done to the game is that a more detailed content warning was added, some references to masturbation were removed, and the gory interactive minigames like the one mentioned above were made non-interactive and skippable. There was also an additional censored mode that skipped these scenes automatically. A message about mental health was also added into the game from charity Safe in Our World. Now, I'm not a fan of censorship. Also, as a longtime fan of horror, I kind of lose sight sometimes of what's considered crossing the line in these kinds of situations. I have my specific things I'm sensitive to and can't stand to see even in the most intentionally nasty horror, but this game didn't really happen to have any of my personal triggers that I can't handle. I do understand that there was a lot of shocking stuff with the intention of being shocking. I could make a whole video about this subject, but as I said before, others have already done that, and I don't personally have all that much to say about the shock content in particular. Just know that this discourse made many anti-censorship people rally behind this game, and it got far more attention because of this than it would have otherwise. For me, I was already following the game's development before this all started, and at the time, the censorship felt like a real threat to the integrity of the artistic expression I was looking forward to experiencing on my platform of choice. In the end, I didn't end up really feeling the effects of the censorship all that much in the game itself, because the gruesome scenes were still in there, just in cutscene form rather than playable. It wasn't ideal, but it didn't ruin the game for me. In the end, it turned out I would have other kinds of issues with the game that I wasn't at all expecting. So then, finally, the game I've been talking about non-stop for who knows how long comes out, and I finally get to play it. I don't have a PlayStation 5 yet at this point, because those were still very hard to come by, so I'll have to play the PS4 version, even though this game is very much optimized for the PS5. Surely that'll be fine though, as I get them both in the bundle I pre-ordered. Well, so much for the photorealistic graphics, as I was looking at the underlayer below where the graphics should pop in but never do for a big chunk of it. One room had all of its furniture gradually disappear. I got stuck under the lake. The game crashed a lot. I had to restart it from time to time because it was so glitchy I couldn't progress. Trophies didn't pop for mandatory story progression even after replaying it. It was a barely playable mess. But hey, I'm pretty chill and understanding when it comes to graphics issues and the occasional bug, compared to most people. It's kind of on me for playing a PS5 game on a PS4 anyway, right? When you're playing a game on launch before any patches, you know to expect some issues that slip past playtesting. You wouldn't let some technical difficulties sully a masterpiece, right? But a masterpiece it was not. Far from it. The start of the game is exactly the same as the demo, but somehow it didn't hit the same way as I was actually getting to play it in context. Must be because I'd already seen it before, right? Well, turns out it was downhill from there. That beautiful face model for Julia from the very start, you'd better forget about that because you won't see it in motion again until the very end. And what you do see is of inconsistent quality. They go out of their way to show as little of the character models as possible. And what we do see ranges from gorgeous to pretty good to what's going on here? The environment is gorgeous and realistic. Not the water though, which is kind of funny considering how the water scene is what drew me in the first place. But it's just so weird how sometimes you can just tell this isn't what this is supposed to look like. The ghost is blurry in a way that looks like a mistake, and hair looks pretty bad at times. Even on the PS5 version where I got to actually see what the game looks like, there's stuff that just looks bad. But again, I understand that MertKayKay is a small Italian developer. You can't put all of your budget into every cutscene. You have to save up on the less important moments to have the big scenes hit really hard. This too I could look past if the game was really great. But the game isn't at all what I thought it would be. Sure, it's a walking sim with occasional puzzles, but I like walking sims. What I tend to like in a game is a good story, and I don't need groundbreaking gameplay to enjoy it. But good lord, for such a short game, this feels like such a slow slog a lot of the time. Your walking and running pace is another thing they decided to approach from a place of realism, and I understand why in principle, but the map is just too big and confusing for that. It's so easy to get lost in the woods, especially when you're trying to find all the optional photo spots on your own. They do give you a bike to use, but you can only ride it on the road and around the house, and it's awkward and unwieldy. Very hard to turn around with this thing, so it's only slightly helpful for a few moments. There are also other storytelling decisions that make this game really slow and boring, which was especially bad when I had to replay it twice to get the platinum, partly because of bugged trophies. The only things you can skip are the parts they had to scramble to censor. For the rest of it, including the many letters, diary entries, and newspapers, you have to wait for it to be read out loud. Julia narrates almost everything going on, so a lot of the time you're just waiting for her to finish talking so you can do what you're supposed to do, like open a door to exit the room. The worst is when it cuts to this text on a dark background that appears slower than the narration at times. These bits, like almost everything else, are unskippable, which is the main thing that makes replaying it kind of rage-inducing. I also had the misfortune of having the bug where you don't get the trophy for playing the first puppet theater sequence, so I had to keep replaying that in hopes of it working until I gave up and just waited a month for the first patch to try it again. These puppet theater sequences have the potential to be really interesting and definitely disturbing as hell, but they're just so long and tedious to play that the cool idea is just ruined. The semi-realistic old-timey camera handling and photo developing mechanic is a really good idea and I like it. However, going back and forth to take a picture, develop it, and then go pick up something from that same location is just not fun and feels like a waste of time. There's an optional side quest that involves sending and receiving messages in Morse code. This is kind of convoluted and you can get really stuck if you don't get how this works right away. And when you get to this point in the game, you're likely pretty tired of playing it anyway. Then there's the actual thing I'm here for. Okay, so after the bomb drop of an intro that we got in the demo, what direction could the rest of the story possibly go? Not where I expected, that's for sure. This is a World War II story, for one thing. And that's fine. I felt like I was learning about this era from a perspective I wasn't used to. Julia is the daughter of an Italian woman and a German man living in Tuscany near the end of the war. There's that subplot with the Morse code puzzles where you participate in the resistance even though your father is German, and that is kind of interesting. There's also a pretty typical story about a vengeful ghost called the White Lady. I'm into that. I'm always up for some nice ghost aesthetics and gloomy vibes. But what I'm actually interested in here is the whole thing about stealing your disabled dead sister's identity while you're not disabled. Turns out that only lasts for a few days until Julia decides she just really wants to play some piano.
Cosa succede qui? Giulia? Sei tu? No, non è possibile. Marta non ha mai suonato. È sorda. Eppure... no. Questa è una pazzia. Dio mio. Ma allora Marta... Ho capito tutto. Ora tutte le attenzioni sono per te, giusto? Eri gelosa, vero? Perché lei era una ragazza stupenda e tu solo una piccola inutile sgualdrina.
What a stupid way to have the reveal happen. This is where the game truly died for me. No matter how you slice it, that just didn't work and completely ruined the existential dread the premise had brought up. And it kind of just keeps getting worse from there somehow. So, it also turns out Martha was faking being deaf all along too.
Ciao Giulia, so che questo ti sembrerà assurdo, ma questa sono io e questa è la mia voce. Siamo uguali anche in questo, è ovvio. In fondo ho sempre parlato. Tu eri la mia voce.
I don't have words. I genuinely don't even know what to say about that. I know this is all about familial trauma, but come on! The game kind of quizzes you on your interpretation of it in the very end via a doll version of Julia in the mirror, and it just goes with what you choose. But at least in my opinion, regardless of what you choose to believe happened as Julia, this is kind of an it was all a hallucination type of deal. Julia gets put in a mental asylum in the end, and to me at least, it seems like Martha was never real and Julia had a psychotic break from reality. So it's up for interpretation whether any of what we saw and did even happened. Again, I'm pretty chill about that trope as well compared to most other people. There have been other pieces of media that I won't spoil here that had an it was all in the main character's imagination ending twist that I still accepted because of its thematic weight and meaning as an exploration of the character. It doesn't work here, even for me. I suppose it's kind of cool that you get to decide what you believe in the end, but I don't like that I don't know if Julia actually killed her mother or not. Because that part of the story did bring back some of that feeling I had originally. Julia killing the mother whose love she was desperate for was tragic. I got a really genuine shock from the abrupt cut from the puppet scene of Julia's doll dismembering the mother doll and burying the parts to actual Julia holding her mother's severed head by the hair. That's definitely one of the most disturbing moments I've experienced in any game. It was so unexpected and horrific. The extreme abuse portrayed in the second puppet theater sequence was really appalling and would have been very impactful if the ending didn't make it seem like that probably never happened either. I know we're dealing with very serious topics here, and the point isn't whether everything happened exactly as we think it did, but how broken this person is to experience her reality in this way. But it just doesn't work, in my opinion. If you want a good game about psychosis, Hellblade is always there. This one is not it. I got a freebie in my pre-order package when I bought Martha is Dead. The developers already did a game about a young woman in Tuscany being sent to an asylum in this era called The Town of Light. And it's really bad. It seems like Martha is Dead was their second attempt at this subject matter, and it is definitely an improvement, but after playing both, I can see that they just kept lots of things from the previous game that didn't work, like the slow walking and endless talking and exposition. They seem to really like to get into controversies, as The Town of Light is criticized for needlessly voyeuristic depictions of sexual trauma and general weirdness around depicting mental illness in women. And they tried to do some of that exact same thing in this game, but had to remove it in the censorship debacle. I understand what kind of awareness they were trying to raise about history, but they could have gone about it in a slightly more delicate way, in my opinion. Alright, I've complained a lot, but I'm not only still thinking about this game years later because I simply hate it, right? So let's end on why I so wish it was better. Just look at all this. It's still beautiful in some parts. And the slow, meditative vibe it has does work for getting you into a state of concentration that makes small things bigger. Like taking a photo of nothing, walking all the way back to the house, back to the basement, slowly developing a photo to reveal the ghost that was there the whole time you were fiddling with your tripod and lenses and filters. I played the game in Italian for authenticity, and I really appreciated the different atmosphere it brought about. I don't get to hear Italian much, and listening to so much of it made me feel immersed in the setting. The modern art style of the illustrations does not fit the setting in any way really, but it's clearly been designed and crafted with purpose by someone with a well-defined style that is just lovely to look at. The secret phrase you must use at the start of all communications with the resistance movement is "town on fire." This is what you're greeted with at the end of the final chapter. Poetic. I've never seen menstruation shown so explicitly in any other game, and men's reactions to this moment that I saw on YouTube were certainly interesting.
Well, why is the bed red?
Maybe she wants to talk to me.
What's wrong with the
What am I
bed?
saying? Fairy tales coming true. Yet I feel... No, these are the thoughts of a crazy person, and I'm not crazy.
Yo, what's up with the bed?
Of course, this is a miscarriage scene, to be read between the lines at this point only to make sense later, but still. I did find it interesting and commendable in its matter-of-factness. The angle this story takes to the Second World War is quite interesting in my opinion. It's a thing that is very present in the story, but it's not really what the story is about. Being in the point of view of someone whose beloved sister lies dead in a coffin with those flags framing the scene is certainly an interesting experience. Julia's German father is the parent who gave her love and attention, so she's been brought up on that side of the conflict. But her lover was part of the resistance movement, and you can apparently do side quests to help them regardless of if you choose to snitch to your father or not. I'm not here to discuss the morality of any of that. I'd hope it's obvious how I personally feel, as I think I have the same opinion on this that everyone should have. I'm only saying these conflicting beliefs are an interesting backdrop for a character study, which I believe this story ultimately is. This is the story of a person trying to survive in this world with mental illness in difficult circumstances. I remain conflicted by this game. I don't even know how it could be fixed, in all honesty. It just so wasn't what I expected, and I really gave it a chance, but it fell apart. This is one of those pieces of media I'll probably always be stuck on unless someone replaces it with something that scratches that itch the demo awakened in me. I love a slow, contemplative story when done well. This one made me want something I didn't know I needed and never delivered. Have you played Martha is Dead? What were your expectations and how did you feel about the experience? I'd love to have a discussion with others in the comments and see if anyone else felt some of these feelings. Thanks for watching until the end. I'd love it if you stuck around if you enjoyed this. Bye!